Good evening. What's up, guys? After 1 week break, because we also deserve a vacation, we are going to do something similar to our first episode.
Yeah, in fact, we selected 3 to 4 news to talk about since last episode.
Right, we'll focus a bit longer on Mark Zuckerberg's latest press release and the Barcelogo attack in Burkina Faso, while at the end we're going to briefly discuss the evolution of Venezuela's post-election crisis since our previously dedicated episode.
Yep, you said everything, and now let's get right into the news. Let's start with the elephant in the room, which is Zuckerberg's letter, and how he admittedly seems to regret. We'll then talk about it. What he has done in the previous years with the Biden administration. So we can start. I think it's a dishonest letter, to be fair. But once again, we'll talk about that later. Essentially, he wrote a letter to the White House because he was exposed, and I think he was trying to cover up more. But um, this is what we know, which is that in the letter, he essentially says that the Biden administration pressured him not to let certain ideas onto the platform. Those ideas were about the COVID pandemic, and that included humor and satire. And not only he was censored, he was repeatedly censored. So in the letter, he also expresses frustration, and he pledges not to repeat that behavior of being essentially a slave of a government, in this case, the American government. He also promises not to start any political initiative because people thought he was biased, and that's the main gist of it. Any thoughts on this, Ale?
Well, I think that apart from being a letter where he regrets what it did and so on and so forth, it's like a sort of also an attack to the Democratic Party, to Biden's administration. So it's a sort of hypocritical letter because on one side he says, yeah, I regret whatever I've done and so on and so forth. But implicitly, I see also an attack to the Dems. And this may play a crucial role seeing that in November there will be the elections. Now Kamala is officially the candidate for the Democrats, and she's the vice president and under Biden's administration. I feel that there's a lot of things. There are a lot of things going on behind this letter. Why he decided to draft it, to send it to the chairman Jordan, and I think that some of those issues related to this letter are also related to Donald Trump, meaning that I'm wrong, maybe I'm right. Time will talk, but I think that he's also scared of Trump in case of the victory of the Republican, since he perceives Trump as a sort of bossy, retaliatory candidate, and if right now he keeps going with the Democrats, or at least not telling anything against the Democrats, uh, maybe Zuckerberg fears a sort of retaliation in terms of obviously I don't know, the economics of Meta or whatever about Meta from the Trump administration, obviously, in case Trump wins the election.
Let me read some of the phrases in the letter so that we can comment on them very quickly. In one of the first paragraphs, he says, or he writes, then I quote, "Our platforms are for everyone. We're about promoting speech and helping people connect in a safe and secure way." Personally, I think this is sort of mystical experience that I'm reading right here, because he says he wants freedom of speech, but in the same sentence, he says he wants safety and security. Now, obviously, those things can a little bit overlap, but mostly they don't. Because if you want freedom of speech, then you can't really create a safe environment, because freedom of speech means having everyone saying what they want, good or bad. Of course, there's exceptions. So already there, I see a little bit of a hypocrisy. Do you agree?
Yeah, I totally agree, because when you let people speak their minds, you will never know, you will never be sure what they're gonna say, against whom or whatever. So you kind of can create a safe and secure environment, your safe and secure social network in this case, but you do not have the guarantee 100% that that will happen, because many people are not, concede me this, able to speak in a diplomatic way. They speak their minds in a barbaric way, we can say, and so they can become more like verbally, obviously, violent, and so on and so forth, and that is not ensuring a safe and secure environment.
There should be a written rule when you open the internet, which is, because this is very implicit, but it's the truth. Whenever I am on a social media app and or the internet, I agree to hearing, reading, seeing all kinds of insults, and I need a thick skin because that's the internet. And every time people say we need um, a safe environment, for who? And how do you create a safe environment? It's a slippery slope. That's why I'm a great free speech candidate, because all those people will say, "Oh, hate speech." Okay, for who? How much? What's the line? You say this is hate speech, and then you add more and more and more to it until you control everything, which is admittedly what was happening with the COVID stuff. In fact, the COVID pandemic as a whole was an experiment, I think, a social experiment, because everybody was so obsessed with essentially being spies on one another. It was the USSR all over again. I've seen this personally because sometimes I expressed my doubts with my friends towards certain aspects of the pandemic. For example, the lockdowns. For example, how everybody supposedly gets a vaccination for free, and they had the vaccines immediately. I was like, let's take some time and see how it works. And everybody's like, no, no, you're bad, eh? And then when it comes, it pops out that, and I quote, repeatedly, the Biden administration repeatedly pressured our teams for months to censor certain COVID-19 content, including humor and satire, which is interesting because I think when you kill humor, when you kill satire, that's when you're really going downhill in a democracy.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. You know me, and you know how libertarian in extreme ways I am about freedom of speech. I would like to have total freedom of speech for everyone. Also, some borderline hate speech until it remains obviously verbal, does not translate into actions. So you know how open I am about freedom of speech. And hearing and reading such words about a president or his administration, um, like blocking on censoring a social network, in this case Meta, from publishing something to the internet users, and not let them being able to read something because maybe there is too much humor, satire, and so on and so forth, is something which I cannot stand with.
Hmm. What do you think about the Russian disinformation part? And can you read a quote about it from the letter?
Yeah, sure. Let me take the part. Okay, yes. Basically, and I quote: "The FBI warned us about a potential Russian disinformation operation about the Biden family and Burisma in the lead up to 2020 election. That fall, when we saw New York Post story reporting on corruption allegations involving then Democrat presidential nominee John Biden's family, we sent the story to fact checkers for review and temporarily demoted it while waiting for a reply." And I skipped a part. We've changed our policies and processes to make sure that these happen again. For instance, we no longer temporarily demote things in the US while waiting for fact checkers. Also,
Actually, the part you skipped was pretty important. When I quote, it's since been made clear that the reporting was not Russian disinformation, and in retrospect, we shouldn't have demoted the story.
yeah, yeah. That is pretty bad. That is pretty bad because it has always happened in the United States, the extreme hate towards communists, so in this case towards Russia, especially in this period which we are under, which Ukraine is under Russian occupation. However, well, in 2020 and 2021, still the war was not going on. But I think that again, just publishing, just avoiding publishing some kind of information because of possible Russian disinformation, not really allowing the social media manager, in this case Zuckerberg and his team, to control whether this was actually Russian disinformation or not, and then we have actually witnessed that it was not Russian disinformation. It's like not allowing again people to exercise their freedom of speech just because you're scared about a potential geopolitical adversary, a geopolitical enemy like Russia is for the United States. And it reminds me of the past, because in the past the United States always did that, and I I feel like this is totally the wrong direction for a democracy, because this is coming like more of a, not a dictatorship, because in this case it's a too strong of a term, but like a sort of censorship regime.
I don't even think they meant it. I think it was all a cover up for the Biden family. And it's clear. I think it's also being documented how the FBI was dismissing all the allegations on the Hunter Biden laptop and the Biden family. So clearly there has been an operation to keep the Biden family secure, and by secure I mean clean actually, so that they weren't prosecuted in any way. So every time we've heard about the Russian disinformation, the Russian interference, that was a lie. It was false. It's been documented. Therefore, this just screams to me there's a major, major problem we have with social media gurus like Zuckerberg and others that decide what happens uh, to a certain extent politically. Because if you censor, well, in that case, half of the population, no, half of the population is too much, but a lot of the population who, for example, was against the pandemic, who, for example, in Florida, we had the DeSantis who had a different lockdown procedure, and he still didn't have the worst of the results. I think California had the opposite in terms of how they were dealing it, and they still had bad results. So as you can see, it was more of like what I want to do, I will try instead, and that was fair because no one knew what was the best approach. The problem jumps in when you start censoring those who don't think like you, and for example, those who say, okay, if you want to take the vaccination, good. If you don't want to, cool. Or those who say, hey, I want less lockdowns and more working possibilities. It's fine. We live in a democracy, and we should be able to do that nonetheless. That's my opinion, at least.
Yeah, sorry to
Lastly,
interrupt you. And
yeah,
I think that the problem here is in the American establishment, meaning that this media pressure, asking some media not to publish something, blocking TV, newspapers, and so on and so forth, is something rooted in the American establishment. Because I'm reading a really interesting book, which is The Illegal Wars of NATO, and specifically in a chapter talking about the war in Vietnam, it is mentioned an operation called Mockingbird, where it has been said that from since the 50s, the 1950s, the CIA continuously ask newspapers, TV broadcasters, and so on and so forth to avoid publishing or talking about something, or instead put in a better position the press, the current administration, and so on and so forth. And so I feel like this is still going on, and this is precisely what happened in this case with Zuckerberg.
that's a great insight, and that's why I think podcasters are important, or independent voices are important, because they're not like CNN and Fox News are the opposite. They're controlled by their respective sides. Instead, I think that's why many YouTubers and podcasters have been growing because they're more independent. Although I think I disagree with a part of what you said, which is just American. Don't you really think that also in Italy, where we live, or we lived, and in other places in the world, the journalists didn't contribute to that hysteria on the pandemic and COVID? I think it's
Oh,
obvious. It's not even a question.
no, 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 no. Yeah, I expressed myself in a non right manner. So I meant in this case, regarding the United States, is something rooted in the American establishment. But obviously, it happens everywhere in the world. Obviously we know China very well, and as you mentioned, Italy. In Italy, I remember I think it was some months ago where like the government asked something to the public television in Italy, to Rai, not to broadcast a specific program. I do not remember precisely what was it, but again, it's the same basically.
Yeah. So we can move on to the next news, unless you have something else to say.
No, no, no. I think we can move on, and we're gonna talk, as we mentioned before, about the Barça logo attack, which occurred on the 24th of August in Burkina Faso. It was conducted by the Janim militants. Please don't let me name them in their full name.
No, no,
Um,
actually, now you do it. I
all
want to
right.
hear it.
So Jamaat Nasr al-Islam wal Muslimim. So
That was horrible, and we'll do it again.
yeah, I know that. So they are an Al Qaeda linked jihadist organization. They killed hundreds of armed forces soldiers and also civilians during the attack, specifically during this attack, who were digging defensive trenches in the Barcelogo department because Burkina Faso government, or actually the military junta, felt like an attack by Janim could occur very soon. So they asked people, military and also civilians, to prepare some trenches to defend. But Janim attacked prior to the end of these trenches, and so they also killed people. Obviously, this is not a new situation in Burkina Faso, because we remember that since August 2015, there is a civil conflict between the government of Burkina Faso and the Islamist rebels. At least 10,000 civilians and combatants were killed, a lot of displaced, more than 2 million people. And I think that is actually not really, we can say, related just to Burkina Faso, but it enters more the sphere of the Sahel crisis, which we know very well is pretty serious.
Why is it serious? Tell me.
So, well, we know that first of all, let me talk about the Janim, just to introduce who they are, what they want. So, Janim is an umbrella coalition of Al Qaeda align groups. It is pretty recent because they announced their existence in March 2017, so it is pretty recent, and they are formed by the groups Ansar al-Din, the Sahara Emirate of Al Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb, Al Murabitun, and the Masina Liberation Front. Their aim is to drive foreign forces out of Mali, and especially the colonial powers of France, obviously. And spoiler, they actually succeeded in that, even if not they, but the military junta. And they maintain allegiance to Al Qaeda, and they've conducted many attacks in Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger, but they also sometimes attacked targets in Ghana, Ivory Coast, Benin, and Togo. Well, as I was saying, and then you will tell me your thoughts about this crisis. It's a pretty serious situation because since a lot of time, at least 2015, when the attack started, but it is a situation which traces back to even before 2015. In the Sahel, there is this problem, which is this double-edged problem, because on the one end, we have the Islamist jihadists, which continuously attack the governments, the military, and obviously they also hit civilians, just to spread their message to achieve their goal, if we can call it a goal. And on the other end, we have the governments, which most of the time, specifically in that region, are very undemocratic. And we can witness, we have a testament with the current governments in those three countries where Janim operates, Niger, Burkina Faso, and Mali, because all the three are under the regime of a military junta. Niger from July 2023, Burkina Faso from September 2023, sorry, and Mali from August 2020. So again, it's a situation which has a double-edged problem. What do you think?
I think that there is a domestic, or no, regional issue and an international issue. Regionally, we have, as you mentioned, this confederation of states. Not really even because technically they're coups, so I don't know how legal they are, but let's call it like that. That are allying together, and they're essentially wanting to correct course by going for for their own interests, and they're doing sort of their own thing, meaning instead at an international level, they're going against the Western forces there. So, for example, France, and they're actually going closer to Russia. We know that there's the Africa Corps. No, it's not the Nazis of World War II. It's the section of Wagner that's dedicated completely to African questions, and obviously also in the Sahel region specifically. Therefore, I think there's a very profound question to be asked also at international level, which is this the beginning of African countries, or not only African countries, moving towards the non-democratic sphere and the Chinese Russian sphere of influence? And if so, why is that the case? Have we been a delusion economically? Have we not been good allies? Have we perhaps pressured them too much militarily? There's many questions to be asked. I don't know the answers to all of them. I know that the other problem, the terrorists, the Janim, they're trying to build. I think they're using two strategies, and tell me if you agree or not. I think they're using building an insurgency strategy, which means they're slowly trying to, from a terrorist group, grow into an insurgent group, which is a much more structured and organized, well, system and network of terrorists. They are trying to let people lose faith in their governments and support this new Janim. And also, they're using another strategy, which is the propaganda of the deed, where they're using high profile violence. For example, the case where they killed the civilians. Uh, and that's because they want to be known. They want their name to go to as many heads as possible, right? Fly over many heads as possible, and to inspire the population to rise.
Yeah, yeah, I totally agree about this to tactics. I mean, they're not alone there because they're not the only terrorist group acting in the Sahel region. There is still ISIS, and then obviously in Africa in general, there are also other groups. We remember Al Shabaab in the Horn of Africa. So they are not the only perpetrators of this message, propaganda of the deed, or building an insurgency in that specific region. But for sure, they are adopting those two tactics in particular. And to come back to what you were saying before, the two questions you asked, well, I think that is there could be both, again, a double answer. On the one end, it's something rooted just in that continent, meaning that sometimes tensions, clashes, revolutions, and so on and so forth uh, arise just because there is a situation. And again, here we can link to the demographic transition theory. Africa is a really young continent compared to other countries and continents. And according to some specific theories, the young age of the population facilitates, we can say, clashes. On the other end, there is the problem also that we as Europeans, or in general the colonial powers which were there once, never really allowed those African countries to we can say to promote themselves, to grow, to have an economic and government stability. And for sure, and also they did not show enough interest because and I give a point from a course that I'm following with ISPI, which is an Italian institute on African geopolitics, where the professor said Africa, and I give you a practical example. On the first resolution brought by Ireland in General Assembly of the United Nations as soon as the war in Ukraine burst out, of all the 54 African countries, only 28 voted in favor of that resolution. The other ones, the other 26, if I'm not wrong, sorry for my mathematical flows, I think 25, 25 voted abstained, and I think one voted against, or someone was also absent. But now let's not talk about numbers. So you see a really, really split situation in Africa, and for what I understood by the course is that those countries which abstained or voted against did so because they felt betrayed, abandoned, whatever, for their internal crisis. For example, Sudan abstained because then they said, why we should care about your war in Ukraine, why you're not caring about our humanitarian and war crisis here in Sudan, and the same also other countries. So I think again the problem is double-edged.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think we can move to Venezuela. Here we had some blackouts, some pretty bad blackouts at that. And obviously, Maduro, guess what he did? He blamed the opposition for it.
Yeah, I mean the situation in Venezuela is still pretty bad. No real evolution has been there since our last episode. We know that now the government, if we can call the government, I'd say the illegitimate government of Maduro is in a very difficult situation. They do not know what to do, how to act. He named Diosdado Cabello as both as Minister of the Interior and also as Minister of Justice and Peace. I think he has done also the same with another minister. The other day, they finally opened back the website where to see the election results, but they have to shut it off immediately because they posted the official results showing Edmundo Gonzalez winning. So they are totally confused. They do not know what to do, but they still continue to repress people going against them. They try. There is a real hunt to Maria Corina Machado and Edmundo Gonzalez, but luckily for them, they are always in the middle of a lot of people supporting them, so they're not able. The government is not able to arrest them. And I think the situation will evolve for sure. And I'm also positive that finally we will have Edmundo Gonzalez as the president and Maduro will leave the government. The thing is when this will happen, because now from the election of the 28th of July, already a month has passed.
I just have one comment on this, and then we can wrap it up with the final news. My comment is on Maduro's quote, which he said, "There is desperate fascism attacking his government," and he vowed to remain alongside the people on the front lines in the battle against this criminal attack. It's so funny that he claims the opposition is fascist while he's literally authoritarian. He's literally essentially a communist, and he's saying that the opposition is authoritarian. Well, they were supposed to be in power while he's on his chair, his comfortable chair, giving orders to others and promoting people who are not probably even supposed to be those ministers with multiple um, ministries at their hands. So Venezuela is not the best place to live in right now if you're against Maduro,
Yeah, totally.
right? This is actually connected to not the previous news, but the one about the Sahel in a broader sense. I'm explaining why. We probably heard about the mass stabbing that happened in how do you pronounce it, Ale? Solingen, Solingen in Germany, where a Syrian man armed with a knife killed 3 people and injured 8 others. The motive of the attack was for apparently radical Islamist convictions. And I think just one comment on this, we have a problem with radicalization of people, and that's happening in Europe, that's happening in America, and it's not only ideological, it's also religious, so we have to address it.
Yeah, these attacks are not new in Europe, France especially, and also Germany suffered them. Um, I think it is interesting how maybe the United States on counterterrorism to stop these attacks. They intervene directly where terrorists are, so in the Middle East, and they do like a preventive, but still a preventive approach, but still with the use of force. While the Europeans seem more like trying to find how to limitate radicalization, try to understand why people radicalize, to make them better off to avoid this, and so on and so forth. And I think it's pretty working in Europe because, I mean, the last years after the chaos in France with the Bataclan and so on and so forth, it's nothing big has happened. I may be wrong, so correct me, please. But
Yeah, I agree. Cool. Do you have any final remarks on anything?
no. I think we are all great,
I do because I'm a pain in the ass,
right?
and I just want to do a very quick a very quick experiment, which is to ask you three questions, and I want you to answer as quickly or as simply as possible. Want to do it?
Yeah,
Okay.
sure.
And it's about the Zuckerberg thing because it's interesting. Do you think Zuck wrote that letter because it was a cover up for something bigger?
Yeah. I totally think that. I think
I
he did that
agree.
right now before doing anything else later.
Right. Then, do you think he had a genuine change of heart so that he was being honest, or once again, it's to cover something?
No, as I said before, just because he's scared of Trump and his possible retaliation.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think he became a nice man. He's simply being strategic. And the third question, does that imply that he might be moving towards the Republican side, or he simply fears the Republican side?
Uh, that is interesting. There is not a straightforward answer. I think he could move to the Republican side, also seeing the possible success Elon Musk will have, and he does not want Musk and X to monopolize all the success of the Republicans, so he may change that to gain in terms of stakes, economics, and also public.
Yeah, cool. I guess we're online in that. Man, we have to find a topic where we disagree. We always agree on everything.
Yeah, you're right, man.
Little tease. Either next week or the one after, we might be able to know our first guest on this show, who is also a dear friend of ours.
And if it happens, the episode will be centered around the topic of jobs, but from a perspective of students.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. And I think if the process will be fun and engaging, we might do different topics with other guests, and that could be really, really special.
Yeah, definitely. In the meantime, follow us on our social media, Instagram and LinkedIn, Network Studenti Sicurezza Italiani, NSSI for the English speakers, on YouTube and our podcast platforms, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Amazon Music.
See you next
Next
time.
time.